I would also like to introduce the moderator. Mr. Yaqub Bangash is going to be moderating the event. He is a historian with a research focus on questions of identity and citizenship in Pakistan. His forthcoming book is on the accession and integration of princely states into Pakistan between 1947 and 1955. Currently, he is investigating the nature of the state and polity the first lawmakers of Pakistan envisioned through an assessment of the debates in the Constituent Assembly of Pakistan. Dr. Bangash has published and spoken widely on issues relating to the Indian princely states, the creation and consolidation of Pakistan, and the rise of regionalism in the country. He holds a BA in history from the University of Notre Dame and a PhD in history from Oxford. He has taught history and politics at Oxford and is currently assistant professor of history at the Forman Christian College in Lahore and a commissioning editor at Oxford University Press. He also writes regularly for the Express Tribune. So, Yaqub, I'll hand over to Yaqub now.
Thank you very much, Amer. Well, welcome to this panel again. I think it's a very important and a poignant moment that we are having this panel, especially since it's just been a little over 40 years that East Pakistan, formerly East Pakistan, became an independent country of Bangladesh. And I must preface this by saying that I think it's quite fascinating that 40 years of the split of Pakistan got almost unnoticed in Western Pakistan, what is Pakistan now, whereas there were lots of events in Bangladesh, in Dhaka, in Chittagong and elsewhere. In Pakistan, no one even mentioned that this had happened. And I think in some ways this is like an event like the partition that we haven't actually begun to speak about up till now. It's something that we'd like to block out. The civil war in effect continued for about 7 to 8 months. And this is something that historically has not been investigated in Pakistan, and politically has not been accepted in Pakistan what had happened at that time. And I think therefore having this panel discussion today is very important, so that at least we can engage with a few of the issues that are the legacy of 1970 and 1971. I must also say that in some ways that the title says the emergence of Bangladesh, a military failure or a collapse of civil society. Those are just two of the myriad of questions and queries and concerns that one can have from the period. The emergence of Bangladesh, maybe one can trace it back to even 1947 or to even 1946 when Sohrawardi wanted an independent Bangladesh in effect. So when we are talking about it, it's not just 1970 and the events of 71. It is a longer trajectory. Maybe one can even trace it back to the rise of internationalism in the aftermath of the partition of Bengal and then the reunification in 1911. So there's a long legacy to it, and I think it will still take us time to even just unravel the issues that relate to it. And therefore, we have got a very eminent panel here to talk specifically about Bangladesh and the rise of the emergence of the new country out of the, in effect, the debris of what was Pakistan from 47 to 1970. And we've got three excellent speakers in that. We will begin with Dr. Samila Bose, who is the lecturer in international politics at the University of Oxford and a fellow of St. Anthony's College. And she's also authored a recent book called Dead Reckoning. And this is a part of a growing interest in investigating events of 1971. And I should add with that that another colleague of ours also published a book called Women, War and the Making of Bangladesh. That was Professor Yasmin Saikia from the Arizona State University. So in the last 6 months, we've actually had two excellent books giving rather different perspectives of the 1971 events. So please do actually have a look at them if you haven't. Both are published by Oxford University Press and should be available outside. Dr. Bose will be followed by Brigadier A.R. Siddiqui, who's also written a number of books on the topic. And his very significant reason of being here is that he was actually there in East Pakistan during 1971. So he can give a first-hand perspective of what he thought, felt, and understood what was happening at that time. And the third speaker we have is Mr. Khalid Ahmed, who, of course, everyone knows, an eminent journalist and a columnist. And we hope that he'll sort of, bring together the larger issues and concerns surrounding this event and actually help us to, in some ways, begin to understand the complexity of what happened in 1970 and 1971. We will give about 10 minutes each for the speakers to present their case, in effect, and then I will try to open it up to questions so that there can be more engagement with the floor and a greater understanding to these issues. So I'd ask Dr. Samila Bose to start. Thank you.
Thank you, Yaqub. With all due respect to the organizers, I would like to express some dissatisfaction with the way the topic has been posed this morning. Emergence of Bangladesh, military failure, or a collapse of civil society. And my answer to that is neither. You could say it was a failure of the military in the sense that you had a military regime, and certainly as soon as the decision was taken to impose a military solution on a political problem, there was no turning back. But I would put it to you that even if the military had not made that blunder at that time, and even if civil society, whoever they are and whatever they were supposed to have done, had done that, Bangladesh would still have emerged. Maybe not in 1971, and maybe not in the manner in which it emerged, but it would have happened. And the reason it would have happened was 1947, harking back to what Yaqub just said. Because of the mistake of 1947. Now there is the fact of the emergence of Bangladesh, and there is the manner in which it came about. In my own work, in Dead Reckoning, I didn't address the long historical roots of the emergence of Bangladesh. Not because it's not important, I think it's very important. It's the most important way of addressing any event. But just because my own humble contribution to the study of this war had a different focus, it was focusing on the detail, on what happened at the ground level to people caught up in that war. And the hope is to understand something about the broader nature of that conflict through what happened in the detailed study. So while in my own study, I did not address the issue of why 1947 is the reason for 1971, I did learn a fair amount about the manner in which it came about. And what I found at the ground level was there was a competing set of nationalisms. One based on Islam and the other contesting it on the basis of a Bengali nationalism. And I will also put it to you that Bengali nationalism actually had nothing to do with the emergence of Bangladesh. I would like you to consider the proposition that Bengali nationalism probably doesn't exist and never did. And we can take this up in the question hour if you would like to do that. It's been a very hard conclusion for me to come to because I always thought I was a Bengali nationalist. But setting that aside for the moment, what I found was at the ground level, this competing set of nationalisms manifested itself in immense brutality and violence by all concerned. The state, the official state and its arms, the army, its auxiliary forces, the putative state and the political activists who wanted a different state, all indulged in this single identity nationalism and excluded people, and anybody who was excluded was dehumanized and brutalized, and in an appalling array of violence. And yesterday when Aisha Jalal was talking about Manto and partition, she came to a point when she said, they were good friends, Hindu and Muslim asked each other, would you kill me? And the answer was yes. We did it in 1947 and we did it in 1971 to ourselves. It need not have happened that way. Czechoslovakia separated into the Czech Republic and Slovakia in a velvet divorce. But we haven't managed to do that in South Asia. We slaughtered each other in 47 and we slaughtered each other in 1971. Now, why is 1947 at the source of this poison? It is because that's when we learned that it was okay to have a nation state built on a single identity in this immensely diverse and heterogeneous region. We thought it was okay. It happened to be Islam at the time for Pakistan. India, thankfully, it's the greatest gift India has had, is a deliberately multi-identity state. But the same knife created both Pakistan and India. And so I think until we acknowledge that the creation of Pakistan and India in 1947 was a mistake, we will not understand why 1971 happened and why it happened the way it happened. Now, what to do about the fact that 1947 imposed this idea that we could have nation states built on particular identities? The same has happened in India. When somebody disagrees with their lot, is unhappy with their lot in India, what do? Look at all of the Northeast, for example. They want another nation state, and they want it on another alternative identity, usually a single identity as well. We can't undo 1947. It happened. We can't undo 1971. That happened as well. What we can do is try for now and for the future to erase the effect of 1947. Now, in 1971, Indira Gandhi had an opportunity to erase 1947, at least in the East, if she had incorporated East Pakistan into India. But she chose not to do that. She left 1947 untouched, put a different label on it, but left it untouched. But today, we need to face up to the mistake of 1947. What can we do? We can have our national leaderships effect policies that make the borders of 1947 irrelevant. I was really heartened to hear yesterday personally 2 people in this festival make the argument, a similar argument about erasing the borders of 1947. One was British. William Dalrymple mentioned the idea of a SARC sort of superstructure. And the other was Mr. Kermani, who has come from Germany, who made a superb comparison with the European project when he pointed out that the nation state is a European idea. They discovered it a couple of centuries ago. It took Europe 150 years to realize that this was a catastrophically bad idea. And having fought 2 world wars in the 20th century, they dropped the idea. But they dropped it on us. And we picked it up and ran with it. And the time has come for us to reject this last poisonous parting gift of European colonialism. How will we do that, though? I'm not going to call for enlightened political leadership because we don't have any. We haven't had any in 65 years, and there's no sign we are going to get any now. Because we do need a grand alliance. We need a grand alliance of Pakistan, India, Bangladesh to erase the mistake of 1947. So what we can do, our politicians are venal. They think short term, and they have made politics a private practice. They don't consider it a public service. So the only way we will have any effect, if we are civil society, is to make our politicians think that it is in their best interest to erase the mistakes of 1947. And I suggest a couple of ways that we can do that. It's a little bit easier for Pakistan because all we need to do is to scare the hell out of our politicians in this country and point out that it might be better to have power and patronage, because that's what they want, in a smaller area as part of a greater superstructure than to be the masters of a nation state that may not exist even 2 weeks from now. Because we have come to a point where there are reasonable, rational people around the world talking about when, not if, Pakistan may cease to exist. So we can try to scare our politicians here. With India, it's a little bit difficult because India is on the roll. But as Siddhartha Deb discussed yesterday as well, underneath the glossy veneer, there's this boiling cauldron of problems that India has. But even if India manages to solve its internal domestic problems, it will never reach the potential it has in terms of power and prosperity unless it is able to resolve this deadly embrace with its neighbor. No way is it going to reach its potential. So we could have a slightly more carrot type of approach towards the Indian politicians. It's the only way that we are going to erase the effect of an enormous mistake in 1947, which created 1971, and also the manner in which we deal with each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bose, for actually arguing for a radical rethink of the nation state and how we actually deal with it in these days. We'll move swiftly on to Brigadier A.R. Siddiqui, who will actually speak from his seat. Brigadier, sir.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good morning. I must apologize for my voice, which gets hoarse sometimes. So if there is a problem, please forgive me for that. I'll try to be as slow as possible. Number 2 point is that I am going to make my presentation from the point of view of a participant. So it may not have the same amount of scholarship as other accounts do have. I had been through this. I saw it right from the beginning. The crisis started and then it ended on 16 December 1971. The subject is Bangladesh, a military failure or collapse of the civil society. Well, there are two sides of it. For Pakistan, it was a total national collapse, a collapse of the military power, of politics, and of society. For India, it was their hour of triumph. 16 December 1971, Pakistan was divided and India achieved the purpose they had been looking for. When I say it with a sense of responsibility. Because Madam Indira Gandhi, the Prime Minister of India, within less than a week of the Operation Searchlight in Dhaka, the military crackdown, most unfortunate affair, she said on the floor of the Lok Sabha that India cannot stay indifferent to whatever is happening in Pakistan. And she wanted military action. I read an excerpt from a statement by General Sam Manekshaw. He was summoned by the Prime Minister sometime in the first week of April, that is less than a month after the Holocaust, after the crackdown started. And I'm lucky to have this statement by General Manekshaw. There was sometime in the first week of April, and he was summoned by the Prime Minister herself, and he says, there was a terribly angry and terribly upset Prime Minister because refugees were pouring into West Bengal, into Assam, and into Tripura. Mind you, this was less than a fortnight after the operation started. And you can imagine the number of refugees pouring into India. It could not be more than a trickle. But she was already presenting it as a very grave crisis. Look at this. So many are coming in. There is a telegram from the Chief Minister of Assam. A telegram, what are you doing about it? She said to me, that is Manekshaw. I said nothing. What has it got to do with me? He said, can't you do something? Why don't you do something? What do you want me to do? The army chief says, I want you to march in. I said, that means war. And she said, I don't mind if it is war. Then Jagjivan Ram, who was then the defense minister, he said, Sam, maan bhi jao. I said, I have given my professional view. Now the government must take a decision. The Prime Minister did not say anything. She was red in the face and said, Acha, cabinet ke baad mulaqat hogi. Everybody walked out. I, being the junior most, was the last to leave, and I smiled at her. Chief, sit down. So I said, Prime Minister, before you open your mouth, do you want me to send in my resignation on the grounds of mental health or physical? She said, oh, sit down, Sam. Everything you told me is true. Yes, look, it's my job to fight. It's my job to fight to win. And he said it, that if you want me to march in now, then I guarantee you 100% defeat. But leave the timings to me, and then I can promise you 100% victory. This was Madam Gandhi in the first week of April. I think, because this is a fact of history, so I would not fight shy of it, there has been a very strong streak of violence embedded in the Nehrus. And while talking of Indira Gandhi, Madam Indira Gandhi, I can't forget the Operation Blue Star of June 1984. And that was probably the only example to date of a government desecrating a place of worship like the Golden Temple in Amritsar. There was, in 1984, the boots were there all over the holy place, and you know what happened after that. And then Madam Gandhi herself made a very violent end. The Prime Minister himself, I'm talking of Prime Minister Nehru, because if you look at the partition, the break of Pakistan in 1971 and the partition of the subcontinent in 1947, you will find quite a few similarities. The only difference was that while the partition of the subcontinent was a political process, mainly a political process, overwhelmingly a political process, the break of Pakistan after the intervention of the Indian army was absolutely military. I can't say what may have happened had India resisted the idea of intervening militarily in East Pakistan. I'm not trying to suggest that East Pakistan and West Pakistan would have stayed one, but the result might have been different and perhaps slightly better. About the civil society, there are two phases of civil society in Pakistan: pre-operation and post-operation. Now, pre-operation was, we had something very good happening in my country, in Pakistan. We had elections on the 7th of December. I beg your pardon? Am I quite loud and clear? No. Is it better now? I beg your pardon? Oh, I see. I warned you, it's not my fault. Yes, because I have a hoarse voice, and then sometimes the microphone doesn't take it very kindly. So, anyway, so I'm talking of the pre-operation state of the civil society. We had election, the first ever election in the history of Pakistan. Then Pakistan was 24 years old. Is that better, madam? Okay. We had elections on the basis of universal adult franchise for the first time, and the elections were rated as very impartial, fair, and transparent. You know something? Double. There should be a sort of a double speak, I'm afraid. Anyway, I think it's too much for you. You can't hold it. No, and I'll try to adjust myself as best as I can. But this is sort of a love label lost in the body. So elections were held, and that was the beginning of the disintegration of the civil society in Pakistan, unfortunately. The election we should have promised more stability, more harmony, and a smooth transition to the transfer of power from the military to the civilians. That became the point of great conflict. Mujibur Rahman, who was the leader of the majority party, of the Awami League, he won all the seats. I think number was 160 something thereabouts, and he won all the seats except 2. And in West Pakistan there were several parties, but the major party was the People's Party, which had 85 seats in the National Assembly. Now what should have happened was, after that rather than the military come into this affair, the politicians should have been able to decide for themselves. This has not happened. For a week or so, I'm witness to it, but I'm not trying to tell you that whatever I say was absolutely correct. This is my personal view. I think the military was on the right path. They were thinking seriously in terms of transferring power as early as possible to the civil. But then there was problem from the People's Party. Mr. Bhutto was not for a transfer of power to the majority party, and he had a point there, but the matter should have been decided by his party and by the other parties in West Pakistan rather than being referred back to the military again. So for a week or 10 days, the military wasn't there. Then Mr. Bhutto came into the picture, and there was a lot of trouble. There was been meeting between Mr. Bhutto and Mujibur Rahman in Dhaka, and then there was a long series of meetings starting 15th March or 16th March 1971, a tripartite meeting between Mujibur Rahman, Yahya Khan and Bhutto, and this came to naught. Because the problem was, the thing was to do for the army, regardless of whatever Mr. Bhutto wanted or Mujibur wanted, Yahya should have convened the National Assembly as promised on the 1st of March, 1971. What happened was that on the 1st of March, when the assembly was to be convened, there was a ghost announcement on Radio Pakistan that it has been postponed sine die. And this most important message, I use the word ghost, this most important message was not read out by Yahya Khan himself, but by someone else, by say a radio man, professional man. And the impression in East Pakistan was that there might have been anti-Yahya coup because Mujibur Rahman and Yahya apparently had some sort of an understanding. So that was the pre-operation phase of the civil society, and this lasted until the 25th of March when Operation Searchlight was imposed in East Pakistan. Now, yes, all right. Well, I got a good message. I'm supposed to wrap up, and I wanted to be very brief anyway. So, I can conclude that there have been 3 main parties to this very unfortunate crisis. It was Pakistan, the oppressor and the eventual loser. India, the rank opportunist, and a warrior. And then Bangladesh, the hapless victims and the winner. So Pakistan was the loser at all counts. Now, I will end with Indira Gandhi to prove my point of view, how keen she was on war and how eagerly was she looking forward to a happy end of the war from their point of view. Now this was on the 16th of December 1900, no, not the 16th, 14th of December 1971, when the GOCNC Western Command, General Sagat, he crossed Meghna and secured his bridgehead on Narayanganj. They were there. I mean, the advance, the forward division was commanded by a Major General Nagara, but Sagat was the overall commander. So when this news was conveyed to the Prime Minister, this is the description I have. It's not mine. This is what I've got from a book called Indian Leadership in the and page number 323. The message arrived that Sagat had crossed the Meghna. Defense Minister Babu Jagjeevan Ram rushed in soon afterwards, while Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, Principal Private Secretary, ran to her office to inform her of this. Soon afterwards, Indira Gandhi was seen running down the corridor, her hair and sari flying. They were all surprised to see the Prime Minister bubbling with joy. And for him, this was the most unforgettable moment of 1971 war, Pakistan's darkest hour and India's finest hour, an hour of great triumph. And I remember, just finish here, the date of 7th December when India recognized Bangladesh. We were listening into the radio. Madam Gandhi was reciting at the Red Fort, and a song was being sung, सरफरोशी की तमन्ना अब हमारे दिल में है, देखना है जोर कितना बाजुए कातिल में है. That was Lata Mangeshkar. I can't forget the moment ever in my life. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Brigadier Saab, for actually giving us a first-hand account of the events of 1970 and 71. Just wanted to highlight one thing that I think comes out of your talk, is that I think another complicating factor in this whole saga is that we need to understand if the military was an instigator or one of the factors that actually precipitated the emergence of Bangladesh. How far was the military intervention by both, in effect, India and Pakistan responsible for what happened in 71? I think that's something which we are still trying to just grapple with and understand, and perhaps will take another couple of years for us to completely understand that. We'll swiftly move on to Mr. Khalid Ahmed, and I'd ask him to come and share his views. Thank you.
I think Sharmila's book has challenged some of the assumptions of what happened on the occasion of the state failure of Pakistan in 1970-71. I think she's done the right thing because some of the statistics of violence were being debated. Once she has set the record straight according to her own research, a lot of controversy has sprung up around her book. After having reviewed the book, I received a lot of negative mail because the book tends to roll back some of the positive things that were happening inside Pakistan, especially in terms of a group feeling, a collective feeling of guilt about what happened in East Pakistan. What she has done, and I think it needed to be done, to rationalize some of the statistics that was coming out of Bangladeshi nationalism. I will not say that her verdict is final. I don't think she will claim that, but she has challenged some of the claims made, and I think that was the right thing to do for her as a scholar. But let me tell you what has happened to us in the process. Her book, by challenging the number of deaths claimed by Bangladesh officially, the number of rapes that were claimed, and the kind of cruelty inflicted on the Bangladeshi population, she has somehow strengthened the state narrative of Pakistan. The official narrative of Pakistan even today is that East Pakistan was fine. Indians somehow walked in and broke Pakistan up. All our textbooks say that. We have not corrected our textbooks also, although increasingly there's a group feeling, a collective feeling inside Pakistan that what we did in East Pakistan was wrong. I think Sharmila is also right in saying that the mistake was made in 1947. I think we have to understand the nature of Pakistani nationalism. It will be good for us if we analyze how we approached East Pakistan, where Bengali nationalism was based on language, and the Pakistan movement, which was increasingly based on Muslim identity and Urdu. If we go back to 1947, as she just said, the mistake was made in 1947, we will realize that the two wings were incompatible in terms of their thinking. OUP has also published the memoirs or the book by Sohrawardi, the biggest leader of East Pakistan, and he actually revolts against the idea of a state based on religion. And I think some of the lines that he has written on what his idea of a state was are very, very clear. And it is now very obvious that the two wings were incompatible in terms of their thinking, in terms of their nationalism. It is also noticeable that the Muslim League, which existed on both sides, debated the problem of the language, and the Bengali members of the Muslim League never agreed to the predominance of Urdu. They never yielded their stance on their feelings about the language, which actually connected them with the other part of Bengal, which the Pakistan movement didn't like. What was happening in Karachi was not good for East Pakistan, and then the economics of the two joined, distantly placed wings of one country complicated matters. Today, the support that Sharmila's book has given unintentionally to the official narrative of Pakistan is being debated. I have received since then another book which actually challenges her claim that some of the statistics was wrong. Let me say that when a state is born, when a nation comes into being, there are certain things that they do instinctively. First of all, to connect people's emotions to the birth of the state, most states claim that the birth was painful. Somehow, making the birth painful means that every time you think about your country, there will be high emotion about it. And in this high emotion, some of the statistics were exaggerated. Now, the official narrative in Pakistan is that what the Bangladeshi narrative is about their state is wrong. Unfortunately, what has happened in Bangladesh since then is a bifurcation on the thinking of what the state should be. 4 years ago, I was in Cox's Bazar attending a conference, and I traveled by bus from Cox's Bazar to Dhaka, and I could see the transformation and also the clash of two ideas in Bangladesh. One was, of course, Bangla nationalism, and the other was Bangladeshi nationalism. And it was quite obvious that there was a kind of revival of religion there, with a lot of input from outside. We know that Pakistan was able to train a lot of people from the religious parties of Bangladesh in Karachi and other madrasas, and they were used in the war in Afghanistan. The split is there in Bangladesh, but this book has shaken up the scenario a little bit. And I think Sharmila she hasn't really talked about it, but I think this is the opportunity for her to explain what kind of effect her new findings, her new research on the statistics of violence will have in Bangladesh and in Pakistan. I personally think that we shouldn't really lean on this book to negate the feeling of guilt we have. I think a collective feeling of guilt is good if you want to go back and correct your mistakes. It is always the individual who has a sense of guilt, and the groups are very cruel, they never feel the guilt. But whenever they do, it leads to something good. And I think we shouldn't let that collective feeling go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed, for those comments. Now we do have a few minutes for questions. I just request that you wait till the mic gets to you, and please just identify yourself and have an exercise in a succinct question, please. Oh gosh, loads of questions. So we'll try to take 3 at a time and then let the panelists respond. Please.
Brigadier Saab, my question is to you. In one of your books, you wrote about the burning of a village. In one of your books, you wrote about an officer who saw a village in Bangladesh being burnt. You saw about it smoke, and the officer didn't understand what the whole thing was about. Here you don't even mention those things. Not a single word of what actually happened. I mean, I thought your narrative, eyewitness narrative, would correct this kind of thing, or would address it at least. So I'd like you to clarify that, if possible. Secondly, Dr. Sharmila Bose, there is as you rightly said, Khalid Saab, there's a wide misunderstanding that her narrative has supported the official narrative of Pakistan. And in one kind of reading, it probably would for some people. Personally, I do not think it does. The reason is that I have read both Yasmin Sakia and reviewed that book, and also her book, reviewed that book also. The correction of certain statistics does not erase the pain, does not erase and that she hasn't. Right? And one last thing, I would agree with the right of self-determination. I do not, however, agree with the right of one nation state wiping the other out of the planet Earth. That's why, while you are completely right that the Western idea of nationalism, etc., they dumped on us, etc., we bought it. But they haven't left it. I mean, the day the League of Nations dream, or the United Nations dream, of there not being weapons with states, even that comes true, then I would agree. Otherwise, I agree that in this subcontinent there should be a Schneegen state, etc. But as long as we have weapons and nuclear weapons possessed by people on both sides, we are not going to have that dream of the League of Nations, etc. So maybe we need to correct that. But I think your book is excellent. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dr. Takraman. Ms. Naz Ikramullah, please.
Well, thank you very much.
There.
No, I must thank him
Exactly.
for raising the question and answering it. All right.
I just wanted to actually correct Yaqub Bangar. It was an error when you said that Shahid Sohrawardi wanted an independent state. I have to say, because it's well known now, even in Stanley Walport's book, that he offered Jinnah, Bangla, the whole of Bangla, as a part of the federating units that Jinnah had envisaged. This is before Mr. Nehru went and messed up stuff. So, you know, and then the Mahasabites in Bangla things, they said we'd rather divide Bengal than have an independent thing. See, this is a very important fact actually, because if we'd had that federating thing, we would not have had the partition as it happened, and nobody in their right mind wanted what happened. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one question there. Is this there?
My name is Firdaus, and I'm from Bangladesh, and I'm fascinated by this panel because it is actually a point of view we never get to hear in our part of the world. To begin with, Dr. Bose, I do not want to go into your book because I'm sure you've read all the reviews and you know the exact reactions that are coming out. But I was very interested in what you had to say about Bengali nationalism today, and that the fact that it doesn't exist. I seem to agree with you on that point, that Bengali nationalism as it is described, as it is this linguistic basis of that nationalism, the cultural basis of it is very fragmented, is very diversified, and within Bangladesh itself we have the competing nationalisms as the last speaker was talking about, that there is a contested Bengali nationalism within Bangladesh itself. And I would go even further back than 47 to look at these contestations to 1905. And in the work that we are doing at the moment, the contested space of the Bengali language itself is very interesting and important. And talking about Suhrawardi and the Congress and the Muslim League, we're forgetting that there was a very strong player in Bengali politics at that moment in the 30s and the 40s, which is the Krishak Proja League, led by A.K. Fazlul Haq. And I was reading Shaista Ikramullah's book, and the complete, what should I say, the complete whatever towards the Krishak Proja League by the Muslim League was also very interesting. So within Bengal, there have been, and within Muslim Bengal, there
Could
have
we
been
just let the panelists respond to this? Thank you.
Okay, I can barely hear, you know, I could barely hear the brigadier. He was sitting next to me. So let's try to hear each other clearly as possible. First of all, about Khalid's comment, thank you for letting me respond to this. I'm very disturbed to hear that anybody in this country should use my book to support the nationalist narrative. It's a completely a misunderstanding or misrepresentation of my book. No right-thinking person could read my book and think it supports the nationalist narratives of any of the three countries involved. It doesn't do so for any of the three countries. Please continue to feel very guilty. You should. My book has many chapters and many whole chapters and then many incidents in the other chapters that recount in gory detail what your army did to innocent people in East Pakistan in 1971. I have spoken to some of the survivors there, some very, very strikingly brave people, and I have read the memoirs of so many others and the family members that I spoke to as well. They did terrible things. Now, just because they didn't kill 3 million people doesn't make that go away. So what? They killed tens of thousands of people. They shouldn't have. Okay, so if whatever they did, the correction is necessary if there has been distortions or exaggerations. But you should certainly feel very guilty, and my book should strengthen those who think that the military should never be involved in politics in any country. Now, I would say one other point that Khalid brought up as well. I agree with pretty much everything he says, but just may I say that I think that it wasn't just, the mistake of 47 wasn't just that the two wings were incompatible in Pakistan. That's quite true. It's very obvious to us today, and we cannot understand in our generation what our leaders were doing when they thought that this was going to work. That's quite true. But I'm making an even deeper point. I think that even if you hadn't been split up in two bits, the problem was the single identity nationalism. We are such a diverse society. If as soon as you privilege one, whether it's being Muslim or whether it's being Bengali or something else, you exclude other people. And as soon as you exclude other people, it becomes okay to drive them out, to kill them and so on. So it's a bigger problem. I thank Dr. Rahman for pointing out that certainly my book or the other new books should not support the nationalist narratives of any country, and that's the whole point of opening up this debate. One last comment about the Bengali nationalism. It's very interesting to hear your point of view. If I may just mention, yes, 1905 or even before, in the so-called Indian or Bengal Renaissance of the late 19th century, I have been rather, disheartened to find that the nationalism that was sold to us as a Bengali nationalism, and I have been brought up in that milieu, was really an upper caste Hindu version of Bengali nationalism. Bengalis, we are a very hybrid group, and it was really that particular group's version of Bengali nationalism that was promoted in the late 19th century and also in 1905, which is why you don't have any Muslims involved in those early revolutionary activities, not because Muslims were, didn't feel they had to fight against colonialism, but because they were excluded from many of the organizations on the basis of religion even at that time. And the other thing that has continued is when we speak of Bengali nationalism, I have found that the religious divide is quite clear. Many Hindus, when they speak about, in India as well, when they speak about Bengali nationalism, they say Bengali nationalism and the Muslims, as if Muslims are something else. And then I have seen the same thing in many Bangladeshi writings as well. So there's a certain Bengali nationalism, and you don't want the domination of the Hindus either. So we are very, very divided, and there really isn't a Bengali nationalism that encompasses us all. And so we shouldn't really talk about that anymore. Thank you.
No.
Doctor?
My question to...
Sorry, we just will let Brigadier Sat respond.
Hello?
I wanted to ask...
Dr. Saab, I'm addressing you because you have answered all the questions that you raised in your narrative much better than I can do it possibly. But I certainly would like to talk about this incident, very unfortunate incident of a village being on fire. This was, this was in Chandpur. And I was with General Hamid, who was then the Chief of Staff, number 2 in the army. We were visiting the area, and Niazi was with us. I'm sorry to say, well, I can't use any harsh language for him. He's dead and gone. But he was there, and General Hamid, he saw the smoke rising, and he said, what the bloody hell is happening there? He said, sir, they are all miscreants. He said, have a heart, Niazi, this village belongs to Pakistan. And you are burning the village and the inmates of the village with that. For God's sake, don't do anything like that. So that was one thing very touching, really. I mean, there was some man who couldn't feel it, really. Thank you very much.
I wanted to ask General Siddiqui
I'm sorry, we run out of time.
I think it's very important to...
Okay, one last question.
Okay, thank you. It's good to get the backbenchers in too. I'm Tahira Abdullah, and I'm a social science researcher from Islamabad. I am appalled that 41 years on, we are still playing the numbers game. If you go back and look at the trials at Nuremberg, and the Bosnia trials, and the Rwanda trials, it wasn't a numbers game, it was the atrocity game that was there. It was the content and the substance of the thing that happened. We have to look at the atrocities that were committed within our own country, by our own people to our own people. And I don't want to get into the numbers game. One rape is one rape too many. One murder is one murder too many. And I think rather than fight over whether 250,000 women were raped or one woman was raped, I would like the government of Pakistan and the army of Pakistan, the armed forces, to first of all acknowledge that these atrocities happened. And secondly, to render
we've really run out of time.
I'm finished, and render an unconditional apology for what happened, even if one woman was raped.
Okay, thank you very much. We've run out of time. The panelists, we have the next session starting now. So I think Mr. Bangash, we can escort them down.
I just want to say, there are authors afterwards. There is a panel on Kashmir here now, so we're going to prepare for that. Thank you.
The authors are going to be at the author signing booth at the book fair area. So if anybody wants to have any further discussions, they're going to be available for book signings or discussions or questions.